Hey guys, welcome back to your Lake Fork Guide. Got another episode of the Guys Network, and I got my main man, Captain Ron, in the house, buddy. How you doing today?
Hey dude, I'm great, man. Ready to talk to you guys about something that I love, you love, we do a whole lot of. Swim bait fishing out deep on big jig heads, big swarming hornet heads. And we'll explain the swarming hornet deal.
Swarming hornet's the deal. We'll explain that in a minute. Stay tuned for that, folks. But, you know, a lot of people like to throw those swim baits up shallow in the spring and the fall. Big swim baits has become one of the more popular techniques you can go to these days. A lot of people are fishing those for big bites. But for some reason, when the fish get off the bank and get grouped up offshore, people throw the deep crankbaits, they throw the Carolina rigs, the jigs. We just don't hear a lot about people throwing the big swim baits offshore, but boy, is it effective.
It is, and in fact, I think in 2014, one of Keith Combs' top baits was a big lead head swim bait, you know, mixed in with a crankbait. And the very next year, the winning fish, the last second fish, the 10-pounder Brent Ayler caught, also came on a giant swim bait on a big jig head. Today, my main man, Lake Fork guide Ronnie Kelly, is going to break it down in depth, so you guys stay tuned. Let's talk about fishing swim baits offshore. There's a couple different ways to do it. Number one's just a good old lead head jig head. This right here is a bait 6 cents makes, and I like this bait right here. This is one of my favorites. This is going to allow you to take that big swim bait or small swim bait, throw it out deep, and reel it across the bottom. Has a great stand-up presentation. It also has a really good screw lock right there. That's going to allow that bait to stay on there. Now I've gone ahead and I've rigged one up for you guys. You guys can see this right here. This is a Smashtech hollow body. It's a 7-inch, and this is a 1-ounce jig head. And you can see that big 8/0 hook. It allows that fish to get that bait all the way in their mouth and penetrate it. Now, this is something I'm going to fish in about 20 to 30 foot of water. Now, when I'm throwing this bait right here, I'm going to allow this bait to get all the way to the bottom, and I want to give it a pretty subtle presentation. I'm going to throw this, make a really long cast, and we'll demonstrate this for you. And I'm going to throw this bait out there, let it hit the bottom, and I'm going to give it just a real slow retrieve. And when it's coming across the bottom of the lake, it's just going to kind of kick and turn. This hollow body likes to turn over on its side a little bit when that tail kicks. So it's going to come over, and this head right here, it's just going to skim across the bottom. And it mimics a bait fish, just going across the bottom, looking for forage. It's something bass can't resist. Now there's another way that I'm going to fish this as well. That's called the countdown method. Now when I do that, what I like to do is, if I'm not trying to present that bait across the bottom, I like to throw this little bait right here. So this is a 6-cents Divine underspin head. And Billy and I referenced earlier something called a swarming hornet, and swarming hornet was actually the first underspin head to come out, and it became really popular with the tour level guys fishing it at Beaver Lake and some of the clear lakes, catching suspended bass. Those tough to catch bass, hanging out in trees, hanging out in docks, and it's something that we've kind of adapted offshore fishing. Now what I like to do on this bait is, let's say I'm sitting at about 25 foot of water, and I got bass. They're not sitting on the bottom, they're being a little bit more stubborn, they're chasing bait, they're all over the place, and no actual bass I'm graphing, they're sitting at 15, so they're 10 foot off the bottom. Now this right here is a 5/8 ounce head, and then it's got a hollow body, so we're probably close to 3/4 of an ounce, maybe just a little bit more total on this bait. So I'm going to give this about a 2-second per foot rate fall. So I'm going to throw this thing out there, and I'm going to count it down to 15 foot. When it gets down to that 15 foot, I'm just going to give it a slow and steady retrieve. I prefer a 7/4 to 1 gear ratio on this, and the only reason is a lot of times when I'm catching bass that deep, they like to come straight up, and it allows me to keep up with them, and I can always just throw that reel and reel it just a little bit slower to keep this bait present right in the middle of it. Now what's unique about this versus the regular jig head is you'll notice the little spinners. So this is something that's designed to crawl across the bottom and give that bait a lot of action right there. And this is designed to fish into the water column and gives this blade a lot of action right there. So these are two totally different presentations, but at the same time they're sort of the same bait. Now let's talk about the gear I'm going to throw. So on this 5/8 ounce Divine underspin head, I'm going to throw a 7 foot 3-inch medium heavy rod. Now The reason I'm not going to throw a really heavy rod on this, even though this is a bit of a heavy bait, is I want to have a lot of parabolic bend right here. If you'll look at this rod right here, I want that rod to have a lot of bend in it. This is a medium wire hook, and these bass, a lot of times, especially when they're up off the bottom and they're chasing bait, they don't really come in and engulf the bait. There's a whole bunch of bait, and a lot of time they're just trying to kill something for them to be able to engulf a little bit easier. So we've got a medium wire hook on this bait, and these bass will come up a lot of times and swipe at it. Now with the parabolic bend in that 7-foot 3-inch medium heavy rod, it allows for that bait to load up into that fish's mouth a little bit more. I prefer 15 to 17 pound fluorocarbon line, and that all depends on the cover that I'm around. If I'm in dense trees, I'm going to go with the 17-pound test. If I'm in open water and there's just not a whole lot of things to get hung on, I'm probably going to stick with 15-pound Seaguar fluorocarbon. It doesn't have much stretch, it sinks with the bait, and it's got a whole lot of sensitivity, so I can feel those real subtle strikes. Now let's move up and talk about this big boy. This is that 1 ounce head. Now I'm going to throw anywhere from a 1/2 ounce, and I might go down to 3/8 ounce, but for me personally, I'm usually going to throw about a 1/2 ounce on a 4.5 inch hollow body up to a 1 ounce on a 7-inch hollow body. Now on this rod right here, I'm going to throw a 7-foot 6-inch heavy action rod. I want a rod that's got a whole lot of meat to it. I'm going to make a really long cast. I need to be able to keep in contact with that bait, and I also need to be able to drive that big 8-aught hook or this big 6-aught hook through that fish's mouth. This bait's going to be fished around a lot of heavy cover, especially being on the bottom of the lake. There's rock, there's roots, there's all kinds of stuff for it to get hung on. So I'm gonna opt for 20-pound line on this bait right here. Now again, on both of those presentations, these Lew's reels right here, these are great reels. This is a 7.5-to-1 hyper mag, and this reel allows for you to make really long casts. It holds a whole lot of that 20-pound fluorocarbon, which is really important, guys. I'm trying to throw this way past the school of fish and be able to bring that through that school of fish and present it to them correctly. And so I'm going to need a lot of line. I don't want to throw all the line off my reel and be down at the bottom of my spool and my 7.5-to-1 becomes a 3.2-to-1. I want to be able to have the full functionality of that reel all the way out on my long cast. The 7.5-to-1, again, it allows me to keep the bait slow, but also to catch up with the fish when they come straight up or they come out. Hey, let's talk about rigging up this hollow body on this jig head. So you can notice that there's a little screw lock. This might throw some of you guys off because you're used to just sliding it up. Now, what I like to do is I like to put the head up onto the bait and kind of get me a little spot right there where I know that I want that hook to finish coming throughout. So I'm going to put my thumb right there. Now I'm going to go through this bait. Now one of the most absolute, if not the most absolute important thing about fishing a swim bait is that hook has got to be straight. Guys, we want that bait to look as perfect to matching the hatch as possible. Other baits, spinner baits, chatter baits, they're kind of moving, they're going all over the place, they're trying to get a reaction strike. This is something we want to imitate a shad as clear as possible. So I'm going to go straight through the nose of that bait, and if you'll notice on most swim baits, there's going to be a little line there. You just want to make sure that that hook comes out of that line. So I'm going to hold this bait just like this, and I'm going to go through the very nose of that boat, lined up with those lines. And again, this is a hollow body, so you're going to find a little hollow pocket. I'm going to push it through that hollow pocket. Now, you're going to notice right here, and I don't know if you guys can see this on camera, but the tip's going to start to push out. And I'm going to make sure that that tip's coming right out on that line. Bam, it's on that line, it's perfect. It's right where I had it marked. Now, the key to this is we're going to spin, pull that around, just like that. Spin it all the way around, and flop that body around just like that. Spin it around, flop that body around, spin it around, and flop that body around just like that. That bait's going to stay on there, it's not coming down. You're going to catch a lot of fish, you're going to catch big fish, and this bait's going to last a long time. So let's talk about what I'm looking for when I'm targeting bass with a big lead head weighted swim bait. So I'm looking for offshore main lake stuff. Points, humps, ridges, drop-offs, road beds, bridges, anything that's going to hold a concentration of bass that are set up to ambush bait fish. Now, when we're talking about the underspin, we're talking about the divine underspin, it's a little bit different. On this bait here, I'm targeting schools of fish that are off the bottom, maybe creek channel bends. We might still be on that same structure. We might be in big flat areas, and we can also be in timber. And so I'm looking for fish that are off the bottom, that are in bait, and I'm trying to get down to a certain depth and present that bait horizontally to them. Yes. Let's talk about presenting the underspin head right here. So I'm sitting in 25 foot of water. Let's say the school of fish that I'm graphing are sitting up 15. So I'm gonna, for math's sake, I'm gonna do a 14-second countdown. So I'm gonna, instead of counting to 1 Mississippi, I'm gonna go to 2 Mississippi all the way to 7. So I'm gonna make a really long cast past the school of fish. Hits the water. 2 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 14 Mississippi. And I'm gonna click in, rod tip down, and I'm just gonna give a slow, steady retrieve right here. Now at times you're gonna get short strikes because again, like I said, you're gonna notice that these fish on this presentation are coming up, slapping at the bait fish. And I wanna show you guys a quick tip. You're reeling your bait in and you feel something that pops your line. It goes pop. All you're gonna do is you feel that bite and that fish doesn't grab it, you're just gonna go and continue to reel it, or do that. The two different things I'm gonna do is just a pop and a reel, or I'm gonna make one turn of the handle. And on that 7.5 to 1 reel, you're moving the bait about almost 2.5 foot when you make that one twitch of the reel. So what that does is those fish that are coming up and they're hitting at it and they're not taking the bait, that just gives them a little cat and mouse, and it makes the other bass come up and grab it. One important thing to remember is when you're using any type of open hook bait, you don't have to really set the hook super hard. Especially when we're using this rod, you see a lot of parabolic rod. This is a Kistler Z-Bone. This is a 7.3 medium heavy rod. You don't have to set the hook super duper hard. When you're throwing this bait, those bass come up and they bite it. All you really have to do is kind of lean into it. And so I'll demonstrate. My hook set's gonna be somewhere similar to this. I'm gonna reel, feel a bite, and all I'm gonna do is pull into that bait. And it's gonna be somewhat similar to what you would see someone set the hook on a crankbait, like just pulling that hook into the bait. Your goal is to hook them into the roof of the mouth. You don't wanna set it too hard and rip the roof of their mouth. You just wanna bury that medium wire hook just in the roof of their mouth, just enough to stick them and get them to the boat. Right. Hey, check it out. One of my absolute favorite ways to catch big bass deep. Big head, big bait, big rod, big line. I'm gonna show you how to fish it. We're gonna make a really long cast past our school of fish. We wanna be set up about 60 to 70 foot past the school of fish. We're gonna make a really long cast. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna let that bait get to the water. I'm gonna watch my line. I wanna keep an eye on that line, because if that line's falling and something hits it, I need to bow up on it. But I'm gonna drop that rod and let that line fall and slack line. I'm gonna let that bait fall and slack line, leaving my bell open. Bam, it hits the bottom. Now, one thing I like to do is I like to take it, I like to pop it to get their attention, and then just give it a steady cadence. I keep my rod pointed towards the bait and give it a slow retrieve. And every once in a while, I'll let it slow down just to kind of bump the bottom. I don't want it to drag across the bottom, but I want it to be really close. If the fish are just a few inches or a few feet off the bottom, I might speed it up just a little bit more, but that's how I'm gonna make the retrieve on that one. Now on this presentation, again, we're using a big rod, big line, and a really big hook. So when this fish bites, my hook set's gonna be a little bit different. I'm gonna go ahead and drive that 8/0 hook through the fish's mouth. So when I'm fishing here and I get a bite, my hook set's gonna be just like any type of a big bait hook set. I wanna set the hook up and get into the roof of the mouth. So it's gonna be right here, and I'm gonna set up just like this. And my goal is to drive that 8/0 hook right through the roof of their mouth and get those big fish right into the boat. Oh boy.
Well, Ronnie, thank you for doing that instruction day, man. Great job on that. That bait, as you guys saw from some of the fish catch footage that you just witnessed, this bait can catch some really good fish in the dog days of summer. Heck, we were even on Power Plant Lake in some of that, and that water was 100 degrees plus in some of the footage you guys just saw.
Hey man, it's a killer technique in the summer and in the winter, and we'll talk about that. We'll come back and we'll present that to you guys this January.
Absolutely.
Something like that. We'll come back here, we'll do the same thing, catch them the same way.
Absolutely.
Man, that was a blast. I enjoyed it. Hey, top of the line gear. Where can you get these jig heads at?
So we can go to 6censfishing.com. You can get the Divine Underspin. You can get the Divine Swimbait jig head as well. When you do go to 6censfishing.com, which is linked below, be sure you punch in the code Your Lake Fork Guide. You'll get a 10% discount on all orders. Also, do us a favor, check out Smashtechbase.com, because these are the best hollow bodies in the game. They've got a harder head, they last longer. When you combine that with that screw lock, you're talking about catching fish after fish after fish. That bait will just hold up so well on those jig heads from 6 Cents. So get the Smashtech base, get the 6 Cents Fishing. Lose reels are the reels that I got faith in. I know you think fondly of them too. Hey guys, do us a favor. American company, one of the most innovative companies in the history of bass fishing. Check out Lose Fishing as well. Come, one more plug. If you want to get out and learn some of these bass fishing techniques that we're always talking about with myself or Captain Ron or any other of the great Lake Fork guys that we work with, please check us out at yourlakeforkguide.com.
And follow me on Instagram at Captain Ron Big Bass.
Guys, that's going to do it for us today. We sure appreciate you watching. Hope you learned something. Hope this helps you catch more and bigger fish. That's why we do it every week. We love you guys. We cannot thank y'all enough for what y'all do to allow us, what y'all do to allow us to live our dream on a day-to-day basis. It really does mean the world. So thank you guys for that, and we'll see you next time right here
On your I've Gone Fishing with Billy Lawson today.